There is something that no one prepares you for. Success doesn't quiet the ego. How many of us battle with our egos? Our ego is necessary, okay? It keeps us safe. It's designed to keep it safe. Success tends to amplify it at times, and that can be really confusing, especially when you've done everything you were told would finally bring peace. You've worked hard, you've showed up, you achieved what you set out to achieve, and yet something still feels restless. This episode is about that moment. Hi, I'm Dr. Asha. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Real Talk. If you're accomplished, visible, or carrying influence, this conversation is for you because when success arrives, it doesn't erase your inner patterns. It puts them under a spotlight. Pressure increases, expectations multiply, and suddenly your internal world matters more than ever. What used to be manageable becomes really loud. Not because you failed, but because success removed the distractions. There was a season in my life I can remember when everything looked right on the outside. It was respected, trusted, seemed capable. But internally, I felt more vigilant than peaceful. I was restless. I noticed how often I was managing the perception and how quickly I reacted to criticism, how difficult it felt to slow down without guilt. That's when I realized something very, very important. Success hadn't made me insecure. It had simply revealed where my ego was still working overtime, wanting to control everything. Ego doesn't look like arrogance most of the time. It looks like needing to stay relevant, feeling responsible for outcomes that aren't fully yours, tying your identity to impact or visibility, the number of views, the number of subscribers, the number of followers, feeling uneasy when you're not really on. Ego becomes the voice that says, now that you're arrived, do not lose it, and it buckles down with fear. That voice is exhausting, and it doesn't get quieter with more success. There's a paradox there. Before success, ego motivates, and after success, ego protects. It becomes hyper-aware, hyper-vigilant, hyper-concerned with maintaining what you've built. That's why so many high-achieving people feel anxious in the stillness. Stillness removes the identity cues that ego relies upon, and spirit, on the other hand, doesn't need the maintenance. It's just there. I remember intentionally doing nothing for a brief period. No proving, no planning, no performing. And what really surprised me wasn't peace, it was total discomfort. Not because rest was wrong, but because ego didn't know how to measure itself there. It was like, wait a minute, what are you doing? You can't just sit here and do nothing. Listen to music and just doze off. Spirit felt calm, but ego felt really exposed. That contrast taught me more than achievement ever did. And ego will ask you, the distinction that changes everything is ego will ask you, who am I without my output? Spirit asks you, who am I regardless of the outcome? One question creates anxiety and the other one creates freedom. Living in a way that you want to is about learning how to answer that second question. When ego drives after success, decisions become reactive. Boundaries blur. Rest feels unearned. Relationships feel strained. And when you have your spirit that's leading, decisions feel clean. No over-explaining is required. Rest becomes strategic, not guilty. Presence deepens your influence. It's not about losing your ambition. It's about stabilizing it. I want you to remember that success doesn't heal the ego. It reveals where healing is still needed. And that is not a flaw. It's an invitation to dive deeper into getting to know yourself, into your own personal self-growth. It's an invitation to lead from steadiness instead of this vigilance, from your alignment instead of this intense pressure, where that pressure cooker is on constantly. From spirit, to lead from spirit and faith instead of fear. And when you do that, success will stop feeling like something you have to protect. It becomes something that you can actually enjoy and soak in and embrace. There's one last thing I want to name before we end today. When ego is exposed after success, many people assume something has gone wrong. They think, why am I still wrestling with this? Why doesn't this feel easier by now? Why do I still feel the pressure when I've already proven myself? But this stage isn't a setback, it's a refinement. This is the phase where life stops asking you to achieve more and starts asking you to be more honest with yourself, more spacious internally, more selective with where your energy goes. Spirit doesn't ask you to abandon your ambition. It asks you to stop using your ambition as your armor. And that's a very different conversation. What I've seen over and over again in this is that people who truly evolve at higher levels aren't the ones who chase the next milestone. They're the ones who learn how to hold success without gripping it so tightly. They let their identity loosen. They stop trying to tie their worth to their outcomes. They lead with presence instead of the pressure. And that's when their influence deepens, not louder, but deeper. So if you're in a season of your life right now where success feels exposed instead of soothing, take this as reassurance. You are not regressing. You're being invited into maturity, into a mature leadership, into leadership that doesn't need constant reinforcement, into confidence that doesn't need to be announced, into faith that it isn't dependent on your results. That's not something you rush. That's something you grow into. And if this conversation stayed with you longer than expected, that's intentional. Some ideas don't need action right away. They need space. Let this one sit with you. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.